Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPad Pro M4 has been out for about 8 months at this point, and I absolutely love using this device. I use it every single day and wanted to share the overall experience. I do love it despite it having a few odd things that Apple made decisions about, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, after using this for quite some time, it's still my favorite device. In fact, it's probably up there with the Mac Mini for my favorite device of 2024. The Vision Pro may be on some others' lists, but I think this is one of my favorite devices Apple has ever made. It's definitely lighter than the older iPad, and we knew that before, but there's something you don't think about or appreciate about it until you pick up one of the previous generations. In fact, my kids use some of the previous generation iPads, and when you pick them up, I actually have one right here, you notice the weight and the overall thickness immediately. So for example, with the latest generation, we have 1.28 pounds or 582 grams, and with the older generation or 6th gen 12.9 inch, it's 1.51 pounds or 685 grams. You don't notice that as much as you do the overall thickness. Because of how thin this device is, it still amazes me every time I pick it up, even 8 months later. So it's the thinnest device Apple has ever made, and it's even thinner than the Apple Pencil Pro itself. So definitely very thin, even though I use the Magi Keyboard on it. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So being as thin, many people were concerned, will it bend, will it break? But it seems to be much more rigid this time around. We've seen tests about this, and it has a spine down the center that seems to keep it nice and strong. I've had no concerns with this. It feels more durable than the previous generation. So just holding it and trying to flex it, it feels like it's much better built or much stronger than the previous generation. So definitely a plus there. As far as the battery life goes, we'll talk about durability in a moment, but as far as battery life goes, it seems to be pretty good, despite some of the changes with what we've had with iPadOS 18. So if we take a look at the overall settings, we'll go to battery, and you'll see my overall usage over the last 10 days. I plugged it in, unplugged it a few minutes ago, but I'm getting about, I'd say 5 to 6 hours of screen on time with iPadOS 18.3. I run betas on this, and it seems to be holding up pretty well. But if I'm watching YouTube and using Safari, which is what I mainly do, I research different videos, plan different videos, watch some videos while I relax, it seems to be a pretty good device that way. When it comes to battery health, it's holding up well. I have 100 cycles with 100% capacity. You'll see all the details here with coconut battery, but it seems to be holding up very well. The first use was in May 2024, and now we're in January 2025, and I've had just 100 cycles. That's because I don't need to charge it as much because it's got a larger battery, and I'm not using it as much as my iPhone. But when I'm not editing a video, I'm typically using the iPad to watch and consume different information, plan, and more, like I mentioned before. Now, I do have the nano texture display, which you need to use the included Apple cleaning cloth with, and this actually works better than actually spraying the display. So just from touching it during the video, you'll see this cleaning cloth, which they include, very expensive on its own, but does a great job keeping it clean. And because of that, it seems to hold up really well. I've had no issues with it whatsoever, other than popping the Apple Pencil off while you're trying to clean it, and you'll see it cleans it very well, very easily, and gets all of your fingerprints off of it. I don't have a single scratch, and I don't have a screen protector. I just use the Magi Keyboard for that. So we'll talk about this a little bit more in a few moments, but I don't have any scratches. It doesn't have anything around the outside edge, maybe one little nick in the corner. I'll explain that in a little bit. And overall, it's held up really, really well. But if you want to keep your data safe when online or on a public network, today's sponsor Surfshark has you covered. I've had Surfshark VPN for years at this point. I've used it on and off while I'm traveling to keep my data safe on public Wi-Fi networks. A VPN or virtual private network shields you from others on the network so they can't access your data, as it creates an encrypted tunnel which acts as a barrier to those trying to intercept you when online. It can also help when you're traveling to access your resources and websites you normally would securely from a different country. So we'll quickly connect. You'll see it here. It connects. We'll see VPN in the upper right-hand corner, and we're good to go. Surfshark allows you to connect unlimited devices with your account and has over 3,200 servers in 100 different countries. Surfshark also never keeps logs of online activity and offers 24/7 customer support. Surfshark also offers different products such as antivirus, alternative ID, as well as search and more. To get Surfshark for yourself, go to surfshark.com/Zollotech for 4 extra months of Surfshark. So give it a try if you haven't used them already. I know I use it when I travel every single time. Now, when we take a look at the overall display, this is Apple's new tandem OLED display. It allows for the super deep blacks, which is great on this display, and it also allows for it to go incredibly bright, unlike many other OLED displays. So it goes up super bright, and I rarely turn it to full brightness unless maybe I'm watching an HDR movie, for example. This solves any of the blooming issues we had with the mini LED displays that we had before, and it also has this nano texture display on it. Now, this isn't going to be for everyone. This nano texture is something that sort of makes it a matte display. You can see it here, but it really helps reduce overall glare, especially in bright environments. So I'm in a studio environment. You can see some lights over here, but it disperses that light very nicely. If we compare it with the previous generation, if I bring in the previous generation, you'll see a light right there. And if I move my iPad on the right with the nano texture display, you can see that it just sort of diffuses it. The same is true if we move to the other light here. It sort of just diffuses it. You can barely see it at all. It really helps, but it does sort of change the way the display looks a little bit. Now, I don't have an issue with it. In fact, I actually think the Mac looks a little bit better than these displays for some reason. They must have made some sort of change, but in general, it looks really great. Now, one of the big concerns is, does PWM bother you, or pulse width modulation? It's the way it controls brightness by flickering the display faster or slower. The faster it flickers, the brighter it is, and this can really bother people's eyes. It affects about 1 in 10 different people, myself included, but so far it hasn't really bothered me. It can cause eye strain, cause some people to feel nauseated, or just sort of get a headache from using it overall. But again, this one hasn't bothered me. Technically, it does have 240 Hertz, which is a little bit lower than you would expect, but it really hasn't bothered me. And the mini LED version did. I don't know if it was the backlight version, but this definitely is easier on my eyes for whatever reason. When it comes to the Apple Pencil, this is definitely a must-buy device if you just want to take notes, maybe even edit video with it or something like that. It makes it sort of like a mouse pointer. However, you can use, of course, a mouse with it if you'd like to instead, but just writing on it is super smooth, and the nano texture display definitely makes it feel a little bit more like paper. I've talked about that in the past with some screen protectors that make it feel that way. This is a little bit less rough than that, but you can definitely notice a difference than just sliding on some slippery glass. So that's really nice, and I love the haptic feedback of the Apple Pencil Pro. Just click on it, and it feels like you're actually clicking it, even though it's just a press. By the way, it shakes the overall pencil. So you can go to Eraser, erase whatever you'd like, click on it again, and of course you have the rotation option as well, depending on what you're drawing. So some really great features with Apple Pencil Pro. If you want the best experience, I would definitely get this with it, but it's not something you have to have, but definitely really nice to have. Now, when it comes to the keyboard, I think that really makes a difference. The Magi Keyboard I use regularly, so let's connect it here. I think this really completes the overall experience. I really like using the Magi Keyboard with it, and I really appreciate it, especially now that it's aluminum. We've got a little bit bigger trackpad, and the keys feel a little better with our little row at the top where we can adjust volume and brightness and more. This made it much better than the previous generation, much more Mac-like. It does add thickness, but again, even picking up an older device, it still feels much thinner than what we had before. So it's a really nice addition, very expensive addition, but definitely a must-have. And even has backlit keys, as I know some people have asked about that. So if I turn off the lights here, let's go ahead and do that. So with the lights off, you can see the backlit keyboard. If we go to the control center, we can make this much brighter as well. So it's a really great addition just to have this. Just makes it easier to see at night. So all of those things make this a must-buy in my opinion. However, I do have a couple complaints about it. After using it for a long period of time, it does tilt a little bit differently than the previous generation and always seems to fall over on my lap. It's something I definitely notice, and I typically find that I tilt this forward like this a little bit to prevent it from tipping over. So it's probably not the best as far as the way you have to tip it in order to get that to align properly so it doesn't fall back, but it is definitely a difference, and it does create sort of a difficulty when you're using it on your lap. So definitely an issue there. Another issue is it's starting to wear a little bit. You may have already noticed this, so if I detach the iPad, you'll see this does pick up a bit of lint on the microfiber, but I do have a string here I haven't removed yet because I knew I was making this video, and you'll see it here. So this is sort of attached to the top. It's coming loose, but everything else is holding up well. So the trackpad is fine. The overall keys are fine. I don't have any of the keys wearing off or anything like that. The outside of it is holding up pretty well, just like the previous one. I don't have any rips. It's just this one little strand here on the side that seems to be giving me an issue from time to time, but overall not too much of a big deal. Now with this closed, it is protecting the iPad. It protects the back, of course, from drops, and also protects the display thanks to a gasket around the outside edge. I was concerned maybe this gasket would flatten out over time, but it seems to still protect it, and I don't get little key marks all over my display like I did on the previous generation. The other thing I wanted to mention is this Magi Keyboard is great, but sometimes I've had the iPad fall out of it. While it's open, I've picked it up like this, maybe bumped it ever so slightly, and it just pops right off. So that's something definitely to consider. Just be careful with it if you pick it up. And that's where I have the actual scratch in the corner. So if we look around the outside edges, you'll see it's mostly okay, but when it did fall off, it scratched the little corner there, and that caused an issue. But that's the only issue I've had with it. And again, that could easily be prevented just by being extra careful with the Magi Keyboard. But I noticed it seemed to be less magnetic than maybe the previous generation. Has lots of magnets to hold on to, but it still seems to be a little bit easier to pop it off of there. One thing I really appreciate about the iPad Pro are the speakers. If you're not using it with headphones, they sound phenomenal. So if we take a closer look at the overall speakers on the back, let's do that, and you can see that with magnet paper. So you'll see we have one here, there's a speaker here, there's one over here, and then one down here. They resonate out the side with these speaker grills, and that's something that definitely makes a difference. We have 4 instead of 2 that we have on the iPad Air. So if we go to my latest video, let's take a listen here. You'll hear what it sounds like. Let me tilt the microphone as well. I would say the overall speakers sound incredible still. They haven't really worn out at all, no issues whatsoever, and you saw this one up to about 81 decibels or so. So not really as loud as the iPhone I find, but they're very clear at the max volume. So that's definitely something that is much better about this than other devices. However, compared to the previous iPad, I still think it lacks a little bit of bass, but that's a compromise due to the overall thinness. So that's probably part of the reason for that. Now, when it comes to the overall chipset, after using this for months, it still feels, in a sense, overpowered. That's not a bad thing necessarily, but there's some things I would love to see Apple add to it. The M4 chipset is incredibly fast. I've really had no slowdowns whatsoever. I played through Monument Valley 3 on here, and I don't play a ton of games on this, but I play through games like that. I've played Call of Duty Mobile here, as well as others that you can see here. So a couple different ones I've tried out, and I'll typically install some, remove some, play some casual games, sometimes Call of Duty, like I said, and it's just super fast overall. If there's frame rate slowdowns, it's typically due to a game that's unoptimized, such as Monument Valley 3, sometimes being a little bit choppy from time to time, but it's super fast and super fluid. So if we go into it, so this shows off the overall smoothness. It's a puzzle game. If you've never played it, you can control different things across it and change the overall look to sort of get this person across the board. I played through all of it, definitely worth playing. However, you do have to have a Netflix account, which is a bit odd, but overall it's super smooth and fast all the time. That comes with everything from ProMotion to scrolling to going into a website and scrolling as well. Everything is just incredibly smooth and fast all the time on this. And we now have things such as Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro. If we go into this, we can fully edit a video here, and that's where I mentioned before. We'll go in here. It says no preview available. Let's go to edit and see if we have anything here. It looks like there's no media here anymore, so we'll go into the sample one that we have here. Go to edit, and then you can go very fine. Let me turn the volume down here. This is Apple's own sample media, but we have HDR, so that's why the brightness has been brought down. But you can see as I scroll through, it's great. And each one of these marks here, I feel using the Apple Pencil. There's a little indent feel as I move back and forth, letting me know I've reached the end. So this is a great device now that we can fully edit. It's a little bit different than using Final Cut Pro on the Mac, but definitely a good experience designed specifically for touch. So it's great to see something utilize that M4 chipset. But overall, the main limitations and frustrations with this typically come to things such as files. I've gotten used to it over time, but I think there's some odd compromises there. Ideally, I would love to have this as an iPad on the go, plug it into maybe a studio display, and then all of a sudden it lights up as a Mac. It's got an M4 in it. I know some people say they don't like this, they do like it. I would love to have that with a keyboard and mouse or trackpad and just use it on the side at the same time. Either way, it is a different experience, and Apple has also added things such as Apple Intelligence to it. I don't think this really optimizes this much better than what we already have, but if we go into Image Playground, you'll see the same thing here I've shown on iPhone. So if we go into Notes, we of course have Apple Intelligence on this being one of the M devices. And if we go into our Apple Intelligence options, of course we can do things such as proofread, rewrite, and these are all things available on iPhone as well. I could go in here and say, give me all the details about the iPad Pro M4 13-inch. And then go ahead and send. It will make an outline of all the different details. However, whether or not it's right is yet to be seen. You'll have to go through and make sure this is all accurate. But if you want something quickly, such as battery life up to 10 hours, it will give you all the details from Apple's website. So I'm still impressed with this device overall, but if you're wondering if you should upgrade to an iPad Pro M4, well, the 11-inch is the exact same experience, it's just a smaller size. I prefer the 13-inch, but they both get similar battery life, and again, I'm still impressed every time I use it. If you don't have an iPad Pro and you've been wanting a new device, this is definitely worth it. But one of the downsides is its overall price is extremely steep. If we go to Apple's website with this iPad Pro, if we go to buy it, you'll see we can pick the 13-inch. It starts at $1,299. We'll pick Space Black like this one, and you can go up to $2,299. This is actually the 1 terabyte, and then $1,999 with the Nano display. I also have cellular, so another $100 or $200. And then if we want to add the Magic Keyboard and Apple Pencil Pro, this is incredibly expensive. So we'll go ahead and no engraving, confirm. You'll see here, Magic Keyboard. We'll confirm, we'll use the black one, exactly everything I have, and you'll see it's $2,677. You can get a MacBook Air that will do all of these things with the exception of touch for a lot less money and do it at the same sort of speed with a larger display. So at this point, this is a hard sell. The MacBook Air is a great buy, about half the price for similar specs. We do have 16 gigs of RAM, but again, the MacBook Air starts at 16 gigs of RAM. So I would like to see them drop the price of this quite a bit. I think this is probably $1,000 too expensive for most people. So if you're going to consider this and you don't have a Mac, well, I would probably opt for the Mac if you need it. But if you want an iPad or you want an upgrade, it's definitely a very nice device. So I see no reason to upgrade to the next generation iPad when it comes out unless there's some significant improvement. But the way Apple is with the latest features, I would expect them to add that to this device for many years to come. And at this point, I see no reason in upgrading again unless there's some significant improvement with the M5 or whatever they're planning next. I almost forgot to mention the camera. I never use the camera. In fact, the entire time I've been using this iPad, I've not once used it, and some people were concerned with them removing one of the cameras. We still have LiDAR if we want to maybe scan a room for 3D scanning or different products. We have one camera, maybe just for looking at things, but your phone is typically better than that. The FaceTime camera is nice, having it centered now with center stage and things like that, but that's the only camera I use, is if I use a FaceTime call. Otherwise, I never use the cameras. But in general, it's nice to have them. But I would love if they got rid of the camera bump overall. I don't think it's necessary. They could put a lower resolution camera, as most people's phones are a little bit better, so maybe they could fit it in there a little bit better in the future. Now let me know what you think of iPad Pro 8 months later or so. Are you using it as your main device? Are you using a regular iPad, or do you prefer a Mac instead? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. I'll link this wallpaper for the iPhone in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.